There are places in America where the land feels older than memory, not ancient in the way museums describe, dated, catalogued, explained, but ancient in the way a scar feels older than the skin around it. You don't learn about those places, you sense them, and once you do, they don't let go. The Great Lakes region has many such scars. People see water and think calm. They see miles of blue stretching toward the horizon and imagine safety, trade routes, summer vacations, postcards. But long before docks and engines and shipping lanes, these waters were spoken of in lowered voices. The tribes who lived along their shores did not see lakes. They saw boundaries, thresholds, living things that could remember, punish, and take. I didn't grow up with those stories. I grew up with maps, flat things, clean lines, borders drawn by people who believed everything could be measured if you tried hard enough. So when I first heard the old warning, "Don't go near the water at dusk," I dismissed it as superstition clinging to relevance. That was my first mistake. The summer I learned the truth. I was documenting forgotten settlements along the northern lake edges, places erased by time, floods, relocations, and quiet agreements no one wanted to revisit. Logging camps, trading posts, villages that existed for a decade and then vanished as if they'd never been. I was there for the land, but the land had something else in mind. On my third evening, I found the mark. It was just beneath the waterline, where the lake pulled back enough to expose stone. At first I thought it was erosion, grooves carved by centuries of ice and wave, but erosion doesn't repeat itself with intent. These marks curved, twisted. They followed a pattern that made the back of my neck tighten before my mind could explain why. 3 long gouges, deep, wide enough that 2 fingers could rest inside them. They weren't scratches. They were impressions, as if something massive had pressed itself against the rock from below. The air felt wrong standing there, heavier, damp in a way that had nothing to do with humidity. Even the insects seemed to avoid the shoreline, their constant background hum fading the closer I stepped to the water. That's when I noticed the smell. Not rot, not fish, metal. Like rain hitting old iron. I crouched, running my hand along the stone, and the cold shocked me. Not normal cold. This felt stored, like the rock had been holding onto it, waiting to pass it along. The lake was calm, no waves, no wind, and yet the surface wasn't still. Slow ripples moved outward from the shoreline, gentle but deliberate, as if something beneath was adjusting its position, watching. I told myself I was tired, that long days distort perception, that every researcher reaches a point where patterns start appearing everywhere. Then I saw the horn, just the tip, dark, curved, smooth as polished bone. It rose no more than a few inches above the water before slipping back beneath the surface, leaving only widening rings behind. I didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't blink. My mind raced for explanations. Driftwood, debris, optical illusion, but none of them fit the shape. None of them explained the way my body reacted before logic arrived. The sudden instinct to back away, the deep, primal certainty that whatever I had seen was not meant to be witnessed. That night, I stayed inside. The cabin creaked as the temperature dropped, wood contracting in slow complaints. Somewhere out on the lake, something moved, slow, heavy, patient. I could feel it the way you feel pressure changes before a storm or the presence of another person standing just out of sight. Sleep came in fragments, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same thing: water parting around a vast, coiled shape, scales dark as whetstone, and horns not decorative, not symbolic, but functional, weapons grown over time. In the dream, it didn't chase me, it didn't roar, it simply turned, acknowledging that I had noticed it. That was enough. By morning, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I hadn't discovered something forgotten. I had stepped too close to something that was still very much awake. And the great horned serpent does not give for witnesses easily. Morning didn't bring relief. That's something people don't tell you. How daylight doesn't always save you. Sometimes it makes things worse. It sharpens details. It confirms that what unsettled you in the dark still exists when the world is supposed to make sense again. The lake looked harmless when I stepped outside. Blue-gray, grassy, glossy, reflecting the pale sky like nothing had ever disturbed it. No trace of the ripples from the night before. No sign of the horn. No indication that something vast had shifted beneath the surface while I lay awake, counting the seconds between creaks of the cabin. But the marks on the stone were still there, unchanged, waiting. I walked the shoreline slowly, forcing myself not to rush, not to act like prey. I've learned that fear has a way of announcing itself even when you think you're hiding it. Whatever lived in that water had survived centuries. It didn't need me to panic to know I was vulnerable. Further down the shore, I found more signs. Not just gouges this time, but indentations, like the stone had once been soft. Depressions shaped in long arcs, overlapping in places, as if something had coiled them repeatedly over time. The scale of it was difficult to process. You could walk the length of one curve and still not see where it ended. This wasn't a single encounter. This was a place of return. Near the tree line, half buried in sand and pine needles, I found something that didn't belong to the land at all. A copper ornament, tarnished green with age, shaped into a spiral with two protruding points, horns, unmistakable even after corrosion had softened the edges. It wasn't modern, no machine marks, no mass production symmetry. This had been shaped by hand, deliberately, with purpose. I held it carefully, and the same cold crept into my fingers. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting another researcher, maybe a ranger. Instead, I found an old man standing just beyond the tree line. He hadn't approached from the path. I would have heard gravel crunch. He seemed to have stepped out of the forest itself, quiet as if the ground had made space for him. He looked at the copper piece in my hand and sighed. "You shouldn't take that," he said. His voice wasn't accusing. It was tired. I asked him who it belonged to. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer to the water, stopping just short of the shoreline. He didn't look at the lake directly, kept his gaze angled down, respectful, cautious. "It belongs to the water," he said finally, "but it wasn't meant to be left uncovered." I asked him what had made the marks in the stone. That's when he looked at me, really looked. His eyes lingered on my face the way someone studies a reflection they don't like. Something unreadable passed through them, recognition, maybe, or concern. "You saw it," he said, not a question. I tried to deny it. The words formed automatically, reflexively, like muscle memory. But he shook his head before I finished. "No," he said, "you don't lie after you've been noticed. That only makes it curious." I asked him what it was. He hesitated, glancing toward the lake again. The surface shimmered faintly, though there was still no wind. Different nations call it different things, he said. Some say it guards the deep places. Some say it feeds on imbalance. Some say it punishes those who forget the old agreements. He gestured at the copper ornament in my hand. That's a warning, he continued. People used to leave them near the water, not offerings, markers, a way of saying we remember you. We haven't forgotten the rules. I asked him what the rules were. He shook his head. Doesn't matter now. Not for you. The air felt heavier again, pressurized. I realized then that the birds had gone quiet. Even the trees seemed still, as if holding their breath. He stepped back toward the forest. Put that back where you found it, he said, and don't stay after sunset. I asked him what would happen if I didn't. He paused, 1 foot already among the roots and shadow. It won't chase you, he said. It doesn't need to. Water is patient, and it remembers faces. Then he was gone. I stood alone on the shore, copper cold in my palm, the lake stretching out before me like an unblinking eye. The surface rippled once, just once, as if acknowledging the conversation. And in that moment, I understood something deeply unsettling. The great horned serpent wasn't hiding. It was allowing me time. Time to decide whether I would respect what the water remembered or become something it needed to erase. I did put the copper back, not immediately. I stood there longer than I should have, weighing it in my hand, feeling its unnatural cold bleed into my skin. There was a strange pull to it. Not temptation exactly, but obligation. Like once you've touched something meant to mark a boundary, you become part of the boundary yourself. When I finally buried it again beneath sand and needles, the lake went still, too still. The surface flattened in a way that felt intentional, as if the water were listening for the sound of my hands leaving the earth. Only when I stepped back did the faint, natural movement return. I should have left that day. That's the truth. Every instinct, human, animal, ancestral, was pointing in one direction, away. But curiosity is a quiet poison. It convinces you that knowledge equals control, that understanding something means it can't harm you. I told myself I needed context. That afternoon, I drove to the nearest town, one of those places that survives on bait shops, aging diners, and people who've lived long enough to stop explaining themselves. I didn't ask about the serpent directly. I'd already learned that names carry weight. Instead, I asked about the lake, about accidents, disappearances. The waitress stiffened when I mentioned dusk near the water. People drone, she said quickly, too quickly. That's what lakes do. I asked if anyone had ever found bodies. She wiped the counter harder than necessary. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes there's nothing to find. An old fisherman sitting nearby laughed under his breath. Lake don't give back what it takes, he said. Not always. Depends what mood it's in. I asked him what he meant. He squinted at me, eyes narrowed in the way of someone deciding whether you're the words, the truth. You from around here? He asked. I shook my head. Then don't worry about it, he said. Just don't go swimming where the water turns dark before the sun sets. That's where it curls. The word curls landed wrong. I asked him what curled. He didn't answer, just drained his coffee and stood, joints cracking like old wood. Every place has something it keeps, he said as he left. This one keeps promises. That night, I broke the first agreement. I stayed past sunset. At first, nothing happened. The sky burned orange and red, then faded to violet. The lake reflected it all like a mirror trying too hard to appear harmless. I sat on the porch of the cabin, recorder beside me, telling myself that if something were going to happen, it would have already. Then the waterline began to move. Not waves, not tide. It receded, slowly, deliberately, pulling back farther than it should have, exposing more stone than I'd seen even that morning. The marks reappeared, clearer now, longer, stretching in arcs that made my chest tighten. I stood. That's when I heard it. Not a splash, not a roar. A low, resonant sound that vibrated more than it echoed, like something massive shifting its weight underwater. The sound traveled through the ground, up my legs, into my ribs. The lake wasn't empty. It was making room. The surface broke again, farther out this time, and something dark rolled just beneath it. Too wide, too smooth. Water slid off its back in sheets, as if repelled by the thing beneath. I couldn't see its head, but I could see the horns, two of them, rising slowly, cutting the surface with no urgency at all. They were longer than I expected, ridged near the base, tapering to brutal points that gleamed wet in the fading light. This wasn't a creature emerging, it was a presence revealing itself. I felt an overwhelming pressure then, not fear, not exactly, but awareness, like being examined from the inside out. Every mistake, every careless thought, every assumption laid bare. I understood something terrible in that moment. The great horned serpent wasn't bound to the lake was bound to it. And by staying, by watching, I had crossed a line that people before me had spent generations teaching their children not to cross. The horns sank back beneath the surface. The water surged forward again, reclaiming the shore, erasing the marks in seconds, but the feeling didn't leave. I went inside, bolted the door, and sat awake until morning. Because now I knew the truth. It wasn't waiting for me to leave. It was waiting to see what I would do next, and whatever choice I made, the water would remember it. I didn't sleep. That's not a dramatic exaggeration. It's a literal one. I lay on the narrow bed, eyes open, listening to the cabin breathe around me. The wood popped and shifted as the temperature dropped, each sound magnified by the certainty that I was no longer alone in the way solitude is always understood. The lake didn't make noise that night. That was worse. No waves lapping, no insects, no wind teasing the tree line. Silence that deep doesn't happen naturally. It has to be held in place. Around midnight, the pressure returned. That same sensation from before, like the air had thickened and the space inside the cabin had grown smaller without physically changing. I felt watched, not from outside, but from below, as if the lake had extended itself inward, pressing its awareness up through the ground, through the foundation, into my chest. Then came the sound, a thud, low, distant, felt more than heard. It came again a few moments later, closer this time. A dull, heavy impact followed by a dragging sensation that vibrated along the underside of the cabin. Dust shook loose from the rafters. Something was moving beneath the water. No swimming, circling. I told myself it was ice shifting, even though it was the wrong season. I told myself it was logs drifting, even though the motion was too deliberate, too rhythmic. Lies come easily when the alternative is admitting you've become the focus of something ancient. The third impact was directly beneath me. The cabin creaked violently, as if lifted a fraction of an inch and sat back down again. My stomach dropped with it. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, Water sloshed hard against wood, followed by a long, scraping sound, like scales. I sat up, heart hammering, every nerve screaming to run, but run where? Into the dark, toward the water, away from the only structure standing between me and whatever was beneath the lake. That's when the smell returned, metallic, sharp, overwhelming. The same smell from the shoreline, but stronger now, thick enough to sting the back of my throat. I covered my mouth, breathing shallowly, afraid that any sound I made would be noticed. Then the voice came, not spoken aloud, inside. It wasn't words, not at first. It was sensation, pressure, images bleeding into thought, deep water, coiled darkness, weight pressing down through centuries of sediment and memory. I saw flashes of things that weren't mine, canoes splitting in storms that rose too fast to outrun, fires extinguished mid-prayer, people dragged under without a ripple, not punishment, correction. The voice found shape slowly, reluctantly, like it was learning how to be understood. You stood where you were not marked. The words weren't angry. They were factual. I shook my head instinctively, though I hadn't been accused of anything yet. I thought of the copper ornament, the warning buried too shallow, perhaps. I thought of the old man's eyes, the way he looked at me like someone watching a clock run out. I didn't know, I whispered. The pressure increased. Knowing was not required. Another image, hands placing copper into earth, generations repeating the same motion, the same understanding passed down not through explanation, but through repetition, respect encoded in habit. It had none of that. I had only curiosity. The cabin shifted again, harder this time. A long section of the floor bowed slightly, wood groaning in protest. Something brushed the underside, slow, exploratory, testing. You stayed after the light left. The presence continued. You watched when the water revealed itself. You remembered when forgetting was permitted. My chest tightened painfully. I realized then what the great horned serpent truly was. Not a monster, not a guardian, a keeper of balance, a living agreement between land and people, one that had been horned, one that had been honored until it wasn't, remembered until it wasn't convenient anymore. And now, like so many things buried and dismissed, it was surfacing again. "Tell me what to do," I said. The words surprised me as much as anything else that night. They weren't brave, they weren't desperate, they were honest. The pressure eased slightly. "Leave what you took," it said. "Carry nothing from the water. Speak of this place only with care. And when the lake calls your attention again, turn away." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" This time, the presence felt closer, heavier. "Then you become a lesson." The scraping beneath the cabin stopped. The smell faded. The silence broke. Waves returning softly to shore, insects resuming their chorus like nothing had ever interrupted them. Dawn came hours later. The lake was calm, harmless. But as I packed my things to leave, I noticed something new to the shoreline. A single fresh groove in the stone, deeper than the rest. Not a warning, a signature, because the great horned serpent had spoken, and now that it had, it would never truly stop listening. I left the cabin that morning with the strange certainty that departure didn't mean escape. The road away from the lake was narrow, barely maintained, winding through trees that leaned inward as if they were listening to what passed between them. I drove slowly, half expecting the ground itself to shift beneath the tires, the lake to follow me somehow, through streams, through veins of water hidden beneath the earth. It didn't. but the feeling followed. Distance didn't weaken it. If anything, it sharpened, like stepping away from a fire only to realize the heat has soaked into my clothes. I spent the next few days in nearby towns, avoiding the shoreline, sleeping poorly, replaying the voice in my head. It hadn't spoken again, not directly, but its presence lingered in quiet moments, in reflective surfaces, in the way water caught my eye wherever I went. Puddles, glass, even condensation on a window. I told myself it was trauma, stress, the mind trying to assign meaning to fear. That explanation almost worked, until I started finding the records. The local archive was small, understaffed, and mostly ignored. That's where the truth tends to settle once it stops being useful. I wasn't looking for legends anymore. I was looking for patterns. I found them faster than I expected. Ship logs first, old ones, handwritten, their pages warped and stained. Reports of sudden storms that appeared without warning, boats pulled sideways as if seized by something beneath the surface. Crews described feeling watched, weighed, measured before the water rose. Many didn't make it back. Those who did told similar stories, though the words changed with time. Horns breaking the surface, a shape beneath the waves, too large to be a whale, too deliberate to be current. Compasses spinning uselessly, refusing to point anywhere but toward the lake's center. Then came the older accounts, mission journals, fur trader letters, translations of indigenous warnings filtered through people who didn't fully understand what they were being told. Words like serpent and monster used clumsily, incorrectly, attempts to force something immense into familiar shapes. But the intent was always the same. The water takes when balance is broken. One account stopped me cold. A village, long gone, once stood near the lake's edge. The people there ignored the old markers. They fished too deep, built too close, took copper from the earth without returning anything to the water. They laughed at warnings that had outlived their usefulness. One night the lake rose without rain, not flooded, reached. Homes were dragged under in silence, no debris washed ashore, no bodies recovered. Just empty ground where a community had existed hours earlier. In the margins, someone had written a single sentence, shaky and cramped. The serpent did not attack, it corrected. I closed the book, hands trembling. That night, the dreams began again. Not visions this time, memories, or something like them. I saw the lake as it once was, before names, before borders. I saw people approach it with care, laying copper at its edge, singing, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. The great horned serpent moved beneath the surface then, vast and unseen, its presence accepted as part of the world's order. Then the songs stopped, the offerings thinned, the land changed, and the serpent waited. I woke before dawn, heart racing, the taste of metal in my mouth. On the bedside table, next to my keys, lay something that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. A strip of wet, dark scale, heavy, cold, unmistakable. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The message was clear. The great horned serpent wasn't confined to one lake, one shoreline, one forgotten agreement. It moved through connected waters, rivers, streams, underground paths carved over millennia. And it hadn't followed me. It had carried its attention with me. The question was no longer whether I would encounter it again. The question was when, and whether the next time the water would still allow me the chance to turn away. I should have destroyed the scale, thrown it back into the nearest body of water, buried it, burned it, anything but what I actually did, which was leave it where it lay, as if acknowledging it without touching it might somehow lessen its hold on me. That was another mistake. By noon, the scale was gone. No open windows, no disturbance, no explanation. Only the faint smell of metal lingering in the air, stronger near the sink, where condensation had begun to bead along the faucet, despite the room being warm. Tiny droplets gathered and slid downward in uneven lines, tracing paths that felt deliberate rather than random. I packed up and left town that same day. I didn't go home. I followed the water, not consciously, not at first. I told myself I was chasing records, filling gaps, confirming timelines. But every road I chose led toward rivers. Every stop brought me closer to places where currents merged, where waterways tangled and deepened. The great horned serpent, I realized, didn't live in isolation. It moved along connections. I arrived at a river junction just before dusk, a place where two wide rivers converged, their waters colliding in a slow, powerful churn. The locals avoided the area, calling it dangerous for boats, unpredictable for fishing. I parked well back from the bank, watching the surface shift in overlapping patterns. Here, the water looked alive, not reflective, watchful. As the light faded, the air thickened again, that same pressure, that same sense of being bathed. I felt it settle over me like a hand on my shoulder, heavy but not violent. The voice returned, "You followed the path." Not accusation, observation. "I didn't mean to," I said aloud, the words feeling small against the wide river. Intention does not erase consequence. The water darkened rapidly, swallowing the last of the sky's reflection. Beneath the surface, something moved, not fast, not slow, just enough to disrupt the current's rhythm. The rivers no longer flowed together naturally. One seemed to bend around the other, giving space, as if something immense occupied the center. Images flooded my mind again. Settlements built at river mouths, dams erected without permission, coppers stripped from hillsides, traded, sold, forgotten. Each act small on its own, each one nudging balance just slightly off-center, until correction became inevitable. I understood then why the serpent had shown itself to me, not because I was special, because I was available. I had no songs to offer, no rituals passed down, no markers etched into muscle memory. I had only awareness, and awareness, once awakened, demands responsibility. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The water surged suddenly, a wave rolling outward from the convergence point, stopping just short of the bank. The ground vibrated beneath my feet. "Memory," the voice said. "Witness." I felt something brush against my mind, not threat, not pain, but weight. A burden placed carefully, deliberately, knowledge layered atop knowledge until it pressed down hard enough to hurt. I saw places I'd never been, lakes far inland, rivers cutting through cities, reservoirs held behind concrete walls that strained and cracked under unseen pressure. The great horned serpent wasn't reacting anymore. It was preparing. The water stilled again, the pressure easing. "You will speak," it said, "and some will listen, and some will not. That is not your concern." The current resumed its natural flow as if nothing had interrupted it. I stood there long after dark, knowing something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just a witness. I was part of the agreement now, whether I wanted to be or not. And somewhere beneath the intersecting rivers, coils of ancient power settle into motion once more. Because when the waters begin to remember, they always begin by choosing someone to carry the warning forward. After the rivers, I stopped pretending this would end on its own. Something had been set in motion, and motion demands direction. So I began looking for people who had felt it too, those who had noticed the water behaving wrong, who had stepped close enough to the edge to hear what most never do. They were harder to find than the records, not because they didn't exist, but because they had learned not to speak. In a town hours downstream, I met a woman who ran a bait shop that never seemed to have customers. Her shelves were full, her register clean, and her eyes constantly flicked toward the river visible through the back window. I didn't ask her about serpents. I asked her when the river changed. She stiffened. People always think it's the flood season, she said carefully, or climate, or bad planning. And you? I asked. She didn't answer at first. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small object wrapped in oilcloth. Copper. Not polished, not decorative, bent slightly, as if it had been handled too often by nervous hands. My grandfather told me to keep this near the water, she said quietly. Said it wasn't for protection. Said it was acknowledgement. I felt the pressure rise instantly. The air thickened. She noticed it too. You feel that? She whispered. I nodded. She swallowed hard. Then you shouldn't be here. I told her what I'd seen, what I'd heard, the marks, the horns, the voice. I expected disbelief, fear, maybe even anger. Instead, she looked relieved. Good, she said. Then it's not just me. She told me her story in fragments, how the river had risen without rain on one night years ago, how something massive had brushed beneath her father's fishing boat, rocking it without capsizing, how the fish disappeared for weeks afterward, how birds refused to land near the banks. They said it was coincidence, she said, but the old ones knew better. They stopped fishing that stretch, left markers, stopped building near the water. And the younger ones, I asked. She laughed bitterly. They didn't listen. The pressure spiked sharply, enough to make my ears ring. Outside, the river surged against its banks. We both froze. It doesn't like that question, she said. That night, I stayed in my car, parked far from the water. Sleep came in shallow bursts, each one filling with images of places I'd never been. Bridges collapsing without warning, water swallowing streets in silence, currents reserving and reversing direction as if obeying a deeper pull. In one dream, I stood on a shoreline lined with copper markers, each one glowing faintly. Behind me, cities loomed. Ahead of me, the water curled inward, drawing itself into a vast spiral. When I woke, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Don't write it down. Don't name it. Turn back while you can. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then the second message arrived. It already knows you won't. I realized then that some people had been chosen before me. Some had listened, some had turned away, and some, perhaps the luckiest of all, had learned just enough to survive, then spent the rest of their lives pretending nothing had happened. But the great horned serpent doesn't forget who was offered understanding, and it doesn't forgive those who refuse it. As dawn broke, the river receded slightly, leaving wet marks on the bank, long, curved impressions pressed deep into the mud, coils, fresh, because the warning phase was ending, and correction, once begun, does not announce itself twice. After the messages, I stopped trusting distance. Whatever this was, It didn't care where I stood, only how aware I had become. Rivers, lakes, reservoirs, underground channels, they weren't separate anymore. They were parts of a single body, connected in ways our maps deliberately simplify. That realization came in a records office that smelled like dust and mildew. I had followed a hunch, nothing mystical, just a pattern I couldn't unsee. Every incident I documented shared a common feature. It occurred where water systems intersected human boundaries, county lines, state borders, jurisdiction edges, places where responsibility becomes blurry. I requested old flood mitigation maps, once no longer in circulation. The clerk hesitated before handing them over. "They aren't digitized," he said. "Nobody asks for these." Unrolled on the table, the maps revealed something modern ones never show: subterranean flow paths, ancient river routes, buried channels, forgotten springs redirected into concrete. And there it was, not labeled, not explained, but unmistakable. A looping from traced faintly through multiple watersheds, passing beneath cities, bending around hills, slipping under highways. Not a straight line, not random. Coiled. I leaned closer, heart racing. When the different maps were layered, decades apart, different survey teams, the same curves appeared again and again, slightly shifted, slightly deeper, but always there. And if something moved slowly but deliberately, a shadow fell across the table. "You shouldn't stack those," a voice said. I looked up. An older man stood behind me, wearing a county badge so worn the lettering had nearly vanished. His eyes never left the maps. "They weren't meant to be seen together," he added. I asked him how long he'd worked there. "Long enough to see what happens when people get curious," he replied. He pointed to one curve near a reservoir I recognized. That town used to sit 5 miles east. After the flood, they rebuilt right on top of it. "On top of what?" I asked. He finally met my eyes. Something that doesn't appreciate being pinned down. He told me they'd tried everything over the years: dams, diversions, spillways, controlled burns along the banks. Each attempt worked for a while, then the water would rise somewhere else, as if pressure were being redirected through an unseen system. "You don't block a serpent," he said flatly. "You give it room." I asked him why none of this was public. He snorted softly. "Because people hear ancient water being and think mythology. But if you say unstable hydrological anomaly, you get funding." He rolled the maps back up with practiced hands. "Problem is," he continued, lowering his voice, "an anomaly doesn't watch you back." That night I dreamed of maps again, but this time they were alive. Lines shifted under my fingers, borders dissolved into ripples. I watched as cities sank not violently but politely, water rising around them without panic, without resistance. In the center of it all, far beneath the surface, something massive adjusted its coils, not angry, not vengeful, correcting imbalance. I woke to the sound of water dripping. Inside my room, a thin line crept from beneath the bathroom door, spreading slowly across the floor. When I turned on the light, it froze in place, as if waiting to see whether I'd noticed. I backed away. The water withdrew, slipping back under the door without leaving a mark. No leak, no overflow, no explanation. Only a certainty setting in my chest. The great horned serpent was no longer responding to disturbance. It was preparing to move. And wherever it decided to shift its weight next, the surface world would feel it, not as disaster, but as an inevitability. Because the thing beneath the maps does not rise suddenly. It repositions. And when it does, everything built on top must either bend or be washed away. After that night, the water stopped acting natural. Not violently, not dramatically. It became intentional. Puddles appeared where no rain had fallen. Streams reversed direction for minutes at a time, then corrected themselves like nothing had happened. Reservoir levels stayed stable on paper, but the shoreline markings told a different story. Wet lines creeping higher, then retreating, as if something were testing boundaries. I started hearing from people who weren't supposed to be connected. A civil engineer in Michigan emailed me photographs of a spillway cracked in a pattern that resembled scales, long, overlapping fractures, each one following a gentle curve. He didn't mention mythology, he just wrote, "This isn't how concrete fails." A fisherman from Oklahoma left a voicemail at 3:12 a.m. "There's something under the water," he whispered. "Not swimming, resting. When it shifts, the whole lake breathes." Then there were the tribal elders. They didn't reach out first. I did, carefully, respectfully, knowing how easily stories get taken and stripped of meaning. Most declined to speak. One didn't. Her voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of something remembered rather than imagined. "You are late," she told me. I asked her what she meant. She explained that the great horned serpent was never a monster, never a guardian in the way outsiders like to frame it. It was a regulator, a force that kept waters from growing stagnant, from being trapped and choked. When rivers are chained, she said, something must pull them free. I told her about the maps, the coils, the movement. She listened without interrupting. Then she said something that tightened my chest. "It is not waking," she corrected me. "It's being displaced." She reminded me that for generations there were places people simply did not build. Confluences left alone, deep bends unmarked, lakes without names, not because they were cursed, because they were occupied. "You dam a river," she continued. "You don't stop the serpent. You force it to press against the walls of the world." I asked her what happens when it can't press anymore. She paused. "When pressure has nowhere to go," she said quietly, "it teaches the land how to move." After that call, the emails stopped feeling random. I noticed timestamps aligning with moon phases, water treatment alerts triggered within hours of seismic readings, tiny ones, dismissed as background noise, always near water, always deep. I forwarded everything to a contact in emergency planning, not folklore, not speculation, just patterns. He called me back an hour later. "You need to stop," he said. "This isn't something we can act on." "Because it's not real?" I asked. "No," he replied, "because it's too real." He told me certain contingency models existed, classified ones, where water didn't behave as passive element, where pressure shifts caused inland flooding without storms, where reservoirs failed upward, not outward. Scenarios they never briefed the public on. "Those models end the same way," he added, "not with destruction, with reclassification." I didn't ask what that meant. I already understood. The warning wasn't meant to save cities or infrastructure. It was meant to prepare records, to explain afterward why rivers changed course, why boundaries redrew themselves, why places that had existed for centuries suddenly became lakes. That night, I stood by a river that should have been calm. The surface was smooth, too smooth. No ripples, no insects. Then slowly, the water dipped, not like a wave, like something beneath it inhaled. I felt it then, not fear, not awe, recognition. The great horned serpent wasn't coming for us. It was correcting a balance we had ignored for too long. And once that correction began, no warning would ever sound loud enough to matter. The first official change came quietly. No alerts, no breaking news banners, just a revised floodplain map uploaded to a government database at 2:47 a.m., time-stamped, approved, unquestioned. I only noticed because I had been staring at the older version for hours. A river bend that had existed my entire life, documented in surveys going back more than a century, was gone, not dried up, not rerouted, erased. In its place was a widening basin marked seasonal expansion zone. Seasonal. There hadn't been a season change. I drove there the next morning. The land hadn't caught up to the paperwork yet. The river still flowed where it always had, but the banks were wrong. The soil was darker, saturated, deeper than it should have been. Trees leaned inward, roots half exposed like fingers trying to keep a grip. And the sound. Water normally talks. It murmurs, splashes, argues with stones. This water was silent. I knelt at the edge and touched it. Cold, but not in the way moving water is cold. This was stored cold. Deep cold, the kind that doesn't belong near the surface. Then I saw the ripple, not outward, downward. A perfect circular depression formed in the center of the river, widened, then vanished. No splash, no disturbance afterward. Like the surface had been tested and approved. The afternoon, 3 more maps changed, not just rivers, lakes, wetlands, reservoir boundaries subtly expanded, their edges softened, terminology altered, words matter. Flood risk became hydrological realignment. Infrastructure threat became natural correction event. Someone, somewhere, was rewriting language fast enough to keep up with something moving even faster beneath it. I received a message from the engineer again, just coordinates this time. When I arrived, I found a spillway that hadn't failed, but had bent. Concrete slabs bowed upward from below, fractured in layered arcs. Water seeped through the cracks, not forcing its way out, but rising gently, steadily, as if carried on a slow, unstoppable breeze. This structure was designed to hold pressure from above, he said, staring at it. Nothing is supposed to push like that from underneath. I asked him what he thought it was. He shook his head. I stopped asking that question. Now I just measure how much ground it takes. That night I dreamed of water without edges, no shores, no banks, no containment, just depth folding over itself, scales of reflected light sliding across something vast and patient. I woke to my phone vibrating. Emergency alert. Localized water level anomaly detected. No storm, no rainfall. By the time dawn arrived, the anomaly had a name, a lake, where a valley had been. People stood at the overlook, stunned, whispering theories, sinkholes, underground springs, seismic shifts. No one mentioned the truth sitting heavy in the air, that this wasn't collapse, it was displacement. I remembered what the elder had said. You force it to press against the walls of the world. We had dammed, diverted, redirected, drained. We had told water where it was allowed to be. And now something ancient, coiled through rivers and aquifers and forgotten channels, was reminding the land of older roots. That evening, as the sun bled red across the new lake's surface, I noticed something else. The water wasn't settling. It was aligning. The shoreline curved in a familiar way, too smooth, too intentional. When I traced it on my phone, overlaying old forgotten maps, my hands began to shake. The curve matched another one, hundreds of miles away, part of a pattern no longer buried underground. The great horned serpent wasn't rising, it was stretching. and once it finished aligning itself with the shape of the land, there would be no map left that could pretend nothing had changed. The pattern wasn't coincidence anymore. I stopped pretending it was. Where I overlaid every altered water boundary, every hydrological realignment, every sudden lake, every river that had quietly changed its mind, the shape emerged without effort. A spine, not symbolic, not metaphorical, geographic, curving across states, bending where ancient bedrock forced it to, straightening where sediment remembered older paths. Tributaries fed into it like ribs, wetlands clustered where joints could be. The great horned serpent had never been a single body of water. It was a system, a living memory threaded through the continent. I shared the composite map with exactly 3 people. 2 never replied. The third sent a message that arrived without a subject line. You shouldn't have drawn that. He was a linguist, retired, specializing in indigenous place names, specifically the ones that didn't translate cleanly. We met near a river whose English name meant nothing, just a word settlers had misheard and simplified until it fit on a sign. Say it out loud, he told me. I did. He winced. That's not a noun, he said. It's a verb describing motion. To bend while advancing, to pass beneath while remaining present, to claim space without breaking the surface. The old languages don't describe the serpent as a creature, he continued. They describe it as a behavior water remembers. I asked him why the changes were accelerating. He looked toward the river. It was higher than it had been a week ago, though there had been no rain. Because it's being named again, he said, incorrectly, repeatedly, by machines now. He explained how modern mapping systems ingest older records, colonial surveys, indigenous accounts misfiled as superstition, missionary journals that tried to explain away what they didn't understand. Fragments of the original names were being reassembled by algorithms that didn't know fear. When you name something badly enough, often enough, he said, you don't weaken it, you confuse it, and confused things seek alignment. That night, the river flooded, not violently, deliberately. Water climbed embankments evenly, submerging roads without tearing them apart. Houses stood intact, water pressing against their walls like a held breath. No debris, no current strong enough to knock anything over, just presence. People evacuated, baffled. Emergency crews watched gauges rise beyond expected limits, then stop, perfectly level, as if the water had found exactly how much space it needed. I waded in, up to my knees. The river didn't push against me, it curved around my legs. I felt it then, not pressure, not cold, but recognition. The sensation you get when you step into a room and realize the conversation stopped because you arrived. I whispered the river's older name, not loudly, not fully, just enough. The surface trembled. Something passed beneath me, deep and vast, displacing water in a way my body understood before my mind did. A slow, immense turning, like a mountain deciding to roll over in its sleep. Images flooded my thoughts, dams cracking without exploding, reservoirs draining not outward but downward, rivers abandoning concrete channels to reclaim stone paths they had worn thousands of years before humans tried to straighten them. I saw cities negotiating with water instead of fighting it, some surviving, some not. The serpent wasn't angry, it was correcting. When I pulled my leg from the river, the water didn't cling, it let me go. Behind me, sirens wailed. Ahead, the river stretched wider, calmer, deeper. The linguist's final message arrived just before his phone went dead. If it finishes remembering itself, it won't need us to notice anymore. Across the country, new anomalies were already being logged. Unseasonal tides, inland whirlpools, springs reopening where none had existed in recorded history. And in places where no water should have been at all, the ground began to sweat. The great horned serpent was no longer confined to legend. It had learned its name again, and it was speaking it through the land. I stopped publishing after that, not out of fear, at least not the kind people expect, but because the story no longer belonged to documentation. It had crossed into participation. Every map I shared, every name I traced, every pattern I clarified seemed to tighten something beneath the continent, like fingers closing around a thought that had been scattered for centuries. The last confirmed alteration happened 3 weeks later. A lake appeared overnight in a valley that had been dry since before recorded history. No seismic event, no storm system. Satellite imagery showed the basin filling evenly from the center outward, as if water had been poured into a mold from below. Local elders arrived before authorities did. They didn't call it a disaster, they called it a return. I went there quietly, no equipment, no recorder, just my body, my memory, and the accumulated weight of everything I'd learned too late to unlearn. The lake was unnaturally still, not stagnant, alive, but calm in a way that felt deliberate. The surface reflected the sky with uncomfortable clarity, as though depth had risen to meet it. I knelt at the edge. This time the water reached for me, not physically, not visibly. It reached in the way a sentence reached for its ending. Images surfaced, not visions, not prophecy, but recollection. I understood then that the great horned serpent had never been waiting to awaken. It had never been dormant. It had been misaligned, forced into channels but cut against its nature, named with words that tried to make it smaller, safer, decorative, reduced to stories meant to scare children away from rivers that settlers needed to cross without listening. But water does not forget pressure. It remembers every stone, every bend, every obstruction, and eventually it corrects. The elders spoke softly among themselves. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the posture: respect without submission, acknowledgement without ownership. They weren't worshipping, they were negotiating coexistence. That's when it became clearer to me this wasn't an ending, it was a rebalancing. The serpent wasn't rising to destroy cities or down the careless. It was expanding its vocabulary, using floods, rerouted currents, reclaimed wetlands as grammar, teaching humans slowly and without malice that permanence was an illusion borrowed from dry land. In the months that followed, infrastructure adapted or failed, concrete cracked where rivers refused to be straightened again. Some towns moved, some vanished quietly, flooded back into watersheds that had always claimed them in older stories. No single catastrophe, no apocalypse, just correction after correction. People began to notice patterns. Certain places spared repeatedly, others reclaimed with eerie precision. Insurance companies called it anomaly clustering, scientists called it climate instability, but the elders knew better. So did I. The last thing I felt at the lake wasn't fear, it was dismissal. The kind you feel when something vast finishes acknowledging you and returns to what actually matters. I left without looking back, because the great horned serpent doesn't chase witnesses. It doesn't need belief. It doesn't even need memory. As long as water flows, even beneath concrete, beneath language, beneath history, it remains. And one day, when the land shifts again and rivers choose new paths without asking permission, People will say it came out of nowhere. They will say no one warned them. But the truth is quieter. The truth is that the serpent never left. It was simply waiting for the world to stop interrupting, so it could finish becoming what it had always been.